There it is. Is there a thing telling me that it's recording? Yes, there it is. Good. This is the problem when I'm so used to WebEx and I don't get to use Zoom anymore. I forget where things are. Feel sad for me, please. Awesome. Well, welcome to DenverScript, January 2021. 2020, go fuck yourself. Thank you for, coming back, or, if you're new, welcome, new first comers. We did take a break in October, November, December, just to kind of give people a little bit of a rest from, virtual fatigue of who the hell wants to go from one virtual meeting to a virtual stand-up. So hopefully some people are recharged and ready to come back to it. But yeah, let's get started. As usually goes, we got, intros, job announcements, what's going on JS land. 6, we got a short presentation, which is myself, Mike, and Guillermo. And then 6:15, we have a longer presentation from Damon. And 6:45, pretty much questions, closing arguments. Oh, I never
Dude, get that
this from
bullshit
the
out of
last
here.
one. Yeah, forget about the presidential debate. I think we're in the clear now. Awesome. So if anyone has job announcements, please post them in the chat to everyone. And after this, we'll make sure to share out those job postings to our meetup and to our Twitter account. We are an open collective. Open collective allows us to take donations that are, we're considered a nonprofit because these are just literally operating costs. For right now, while we're remote, this is just to cover our pro Zoom account. But thank you, Garrett Dawson and Ian Solomon, who have been longtime contributors for like a year plus, always giving us $5 a month. So, I mean, even the tiny bit helps, like, if it's $1 a month, whatever. But when we get back in person, those operation costs go skyrocket as we provide pizza, beer, and be able to, get swag for people or start holding workshops or whatever events just to help cover our costs. So opencollective.com/DenverScript if you have the ability to help us out with our operation costs. We appreciate it. Call for speakers. We're always looking for new speakers. We are actually looking for speakers for February and so on for the rest of the year. So if you're interested in giving a talk, reach out to Guillermo, Mike, or myself. We have a Google form that's just bit.ly/ds-talk, and you can submit your talk there, and we'll get in touch with you.
Here's what I found.
And thank you, Google Assistant, for thinking I was talking to you. Code of conduct. Be excellent to each other. Think we can all get behind that. Be inclusive and invite others to chat. That's, while still our code of conduct, it's a little more difficult while we're here in virtual land, but when we get back in person, these are definitely things to think about and live by. As you're asking questions to speakers, no statement questions, please. Do not say like, well, here's what I did, or here's what I think. It's just kind of a jerk thing to do to a speaker. And if you have any questions about our full code of conduct, you can go to DenverScript.com, and on our website, you can find our links to Open Collective, YouTube, where we upload our recordings every time. Yeah, it's basically a link hodgepodge. Sweet. What's going on in JS land?
JavaScript land. So we've, as Matt said, we've been gone for several months now. And during that time, the Chrome DevTools team decided to pick up on the slack. They had sort of dropped the ball there for a bit, and they made highlights videos for all of the Chrome the releases that we had missed and we hadn't seen while we were gone, or even before we left.
Yeah. Shit, dude,
So,
you're gonna have to give a synopsis of this.
Yeah, so we'll go through kind of a quick version. So for anybody that's curious, we're gonna post these like we always do. We have we've had Chrome 86, 87, and 88 come out since we've been gone. There is a highlights video and then links to the release notes for all of these. We'll kind of go through at a high level. So with 86, if you have media players, there's a new media panel. So now you can debug that. Oh, the node screenshots is really cool. If you want to take a screenshot of a specific DOM node, you can now go and right click it and then in the elements inspector and click screenshot, and it'll take a screenshot of only that DOM node with nothing else around it. So that's pretty neat. They've been doing stuff with accessibility for a long time with the AA and AAA accessibility stuff. There was, if you guys remember in previous presentations we've done where it showed that line and sort of like above here is AA and below is not or whatever. Now, if it's not compliant, it'll give you a suggestion on a nearby color that you can use to have a compliant AA or AAA rating, and you can just click it and it works. Something that you'll see as a theme here going throughout from 86 through 88, and I'm sure they'll continue doing, usually the DevTools team gets into like a theme and they just kind of run with that for the next year or so, is emulation of different things. So you can go to your page now and you can emulate what your page would look like with disabled fonts. And there's gonna be more of those in the later releases that we'll talk about. Oh yeah, you can also emulate what it looks like when you have an idle user. And then Lighthouse, as always, has a bunch of performance updates. So that was 86. 87, again, release notes and video. Oh, they've added enhanced debugging for CSS grids. So if you can scroll down a little bit, Matt. So this is actually pretty cool. You can now, if you use grids a lot, they're now beefing up their support for CSS grids. So if you see here this snack box, we did a grid, and for the template areas, we named them these different things. You can now, if you click on these things here, track sizes and area names, you can see which grid corresponds to what, and both its grid size and then its computed size that it actually rendered on the page. So that's pretty cool.
So now you don't have to use Firefox.
Yeah, there you go. So if we keep going, again, another emulation. So you can, if you do a lot of auth work, you can now do an emulation of WebAuthn in DevTools, and then you can, so you don't have to actually connect to that auth backend, and you can see those auth requests coming out. So for those of you that have worked with DevTools a lot, you'll know that if you're in, for example, the sources panel and you hit the escape key, that the console would pop up on the bottom of the page and you could toggle the console up and down that way. They added a new feature now where you can now view any two panels, not just the console, using this new move to bottom feature. So if you go up to the tabs and you right click on any tab, and you click move to bottom, it'll drop that one to the bottom so you can have two different tabs open at the same time. This one I was really excited about. CSS Property Grouping is really cool. If you guys have ever been doing CSS debugging, which I hate probably because I'm not great at it, but if you've ever done CSS debugging and you're kind of hunting everywhere for what are all the places that are applying styles for like padding left, and you're like doing like a filter for padding left and searching through it, those things are now grouped and nested. So you can click on this grouping ability and it'll do all the different CSS properties that are being applied in a collapsed nested way. So you can see all of them that are being applied. Really cool stuff. Which brings us to 88, highlights, videos, and release notes. Oh, this one is really cool. So if you work with gradients, I'm not sure how often this would be used, but I thought it was really neat the way it comes together. There's a new way that you can mess with your gradients in real time. So this little clock here, which, for degrees, you can like dial it around, and it dynamically will change like your gradient for you on your page. And so you can see the resultant gradient result by changing the degrees without having to, do it and then refresh. So I thought that was actually pretty cool how they always add these nice little things for immediate response. And I'll tell you guys something that I've said in conference talks before. If you are a JavaScript only developer and you've not ever written in another language, like a mobile language like iOS or Android, or if you've not worked with mobile developers, then you probably don't realize how cool some of these things are that we have, that you just type in a color and immediately changes on the page, or you modify some of these sizes and it immediately changes. We're incredibly spoiled in the JavaScript world with things like DevTools, but that kind of stuff is really, really cool to see. So continuing on, again, more emulation. You can emulate what your page would look like if somebody tried to use an unsupported image type. Next one is in the network panel. When there's a CORS error, it gives you a better readout of what it is versus just the generic error that's normally thrown up there. For service workers, some enhanced help for service workers. You can now see all the network requests made specifically per service worker. Also in the network panel, you can now copy entire stack traces of network requests and copy specific values. You can highlight pseudo elements in the elements panel. And yeah, Lots of cool stuff. I know, Mike, you were excited about some of the experimental features they added. Did you want to talk through some of these?
Yeah, experimental features are always really neat. So again, you opt into these through settings, experiments through your dev tools. And this is one like in, if you're using Flexbox, like you can see there where it says center, flex end, flex start, it's giving you a visual representation of what that property will do. So like justify content center will give you it like in the middle of your container, or it'll put it at the end or the start, space around, space between, all of that stuff, giving you like kind of a nice representation of what the property will do. And then the next one, custom chords for keyboard shortcuts. If you keep scrolling down, Matt, there's a screenshot. Basically allows you, like, if you want to record your network traffic or whatever it might be, like you can just create a key chord and allow you to like do cool stuff. Or if you clear your console a lot, Control L apparently is something that you can do, or Command K. You can make it whatever you want, customized to your heart's content.
That's super cool. Sweet. So that is what we are excited about. What are you guys excited about? And please feel free to share. This can be anything. You know, here we were talking through some of the new features in dev tools. In a bit, we'll be talking about some of the new features that are coming out or that have come out in ES 2020. But this can be something you're excited about at a language level, software development or architecture in general, or it could be something that's just new to you. You know, like if there's a new framework that you've stumbled upon or a really good training resource that you're utilizing. And similarly, even if it's not necessarily a new thing, if you've had any what we call high five moments this month, like something you want to share, like just like, hey, I finally, you know, wrapped my head around this new framework, or I solved this like gnarly bug and I was able to use this new thing. This is your safe space where you are around a group of people who will also appreciate that this thing went well for you. So feel free to share that. What are you guys excited about? It can either be like a high level thing or something super personal to a project you were working on. Feel free to share.
There are no wrong answers here.
Mm-hmm. Always got to wait for the first person, then other people start volunteering.
All right, I'm gonna jump in here.
There you go. Okay, what's up?
Thank you.
Like I mentioned, I'm a newbie at this stuff, and I'm not quite at this checking out the new stuff for dev tools, but I was going through a course recently that was focusing on algorithms and including recursion. And visualizing recursion was a challenge for me, probably when this course began, but like it started showing like walking through in a snippet, step by step, and looking at the call stack as the call stack grows and changes. And that got me super stoked. So I was stoked about dev tools and I was stoked about recursion, and life made sense for like those 5 minutes. It was great.
Awesome. Congrats. Yeah.
What was the,
ahead,
where
man.
was the algorithm course from?
Udemy. It was a Steel Colt's course. I can drop it in the chat.
That'd be
Yeah,
great.
please do.
Well, congrats. Recursion can definitely be mind bending when you first start dealing with it. So thanks for sharing that, and thanks for being open and honest about, you know, sort of how you had trouble with it at first, because they can definitely be intimidating for people the first time going through it. So
was that the advanced JavaScript algorithms and data structures course? So actually took that one too.
Yep. And he walks through it step by step. I was super stoked. So I was walking through someone else who recently completed the same program and was able to like step it through for them. And I'm like, yep, I understand this now.
You got it. Udemy had a big sale, and I bought that one for like $11.99.
cool. Ooh, you
It
just
looks like there's still a sale going on. Kendra just dropped a link in there, and the course is $13. So go to Udemy right now.
Get it?
Well,
Get it? It's good.
Yeah, so you just reminded me. So Udemy, basically, I have rarely seen a time where Udemy didn't have a sale going on for one thing or another. So if you ever find yourself thinking about taking a course on Udemy and you see it for some reason being at like full price, try going back like the next day, or try opening like an incognito browser or opening Firefox and going, because usually it's based on cookies or something that they'll like try and not give you the discount. I'll put it this way. I've been using Udemy on and off for about like 3 years, and I've never paid full price for a course ever. So yeah, so just something to look out for. If you think you're about to pay like $90 for a course, like you probably don't need to. Cool, thank you. So who else? Anything at all that you're excited about? Very high level stuff, or just something that was new or exciting for you?
Okay, so here's one. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Personal, I finished a Turing boot camp in November, and I'm doing coding challenge for a job. And since Saturday, I have learned basics of PHP, Ajax, jQuery, and like been able to get a working app without knowing any of this stuff before Friday. So I'm really happy that I was able to get this going. I did get some help, but like most of this was on my own figuring it out. So that was pretty great for me.
That's great. Congratulations.
Hell yeah. Congrats.
Did you have any resources that you recommend for when you were going through learning some of those things?
So I did Code Academy, just the first couple of lessons on PHP, just to have an understanding of like how things are structured and how to do some basic stuff. I used a lot of Stack Overflow answers because the PHP stuff was specifically kind of weird because I had to do like an API route through the PHP to get to the API to avoid cores. It was a pain in the ass, honestly. I have this yeah, thanks. I have the JavaScript and jQuery book, which I thought was pretty good for just some basics for Ajax and jQuery. I got all of the basics I was doing for the calls for that from there. But otherwise, lots and lots of Googling and Stack Overflow.
Cool. Well, congrats.
Thanks.
I think there was somebody else was jumping in there at the same time.
Yeah, this is David. Just a note on exploring new silicon, as in M1 Max.
Okay.
If you use dual display setup right now, you're going to need a display link adapter because the M1s only support one external display, which is a real pain. And, you know, basically a comment just to look out for.
Well, so sorry. So you were saying that was the single display only is only supported on what?
The M1 Max only support one external display. So in order to get dual display, then you have to buy a display link adapter that plugs into the USB-C,
right?
And then you can split it out to dual. But natively, it does not support dual display.
Oh, that's a huge bummer.
Damn you, Max.
I've been looking at new Macs and definitely not getting an M1.
For sure.
2015 model is the last good one.
That's the one that I bought. I deliberately bought the older version so that I didn't have to deal with the stupid little touchpad or all the USB-C only. Or cool. Let's do maybe a couple more.
Hey, I'm Justin.
Yeah.
Well, I was talking to Matt earlier. I'm a organizer for Seattle JS, Seattle's largest JavaScript meetup group. We do all kinds of events.
Cool.
My favorite is the Code Kata's monthly event, which I run. It's a coding challenge event where everybody gets to work on problems together separately, and then everybody presents their solutions and gets to talk about their code. So it's good practice for talking about code for newbies and experienced people. And generally, it's if you like solving puzzles and doing little coding challenges, it's fun. We do it.
What was the name of the event again?
Code Katas with Seattle JS.
Kata like that, K-A-T-A.
Yeah, with an S. You can find it on Meetup at the Seattle JS group.
Cool.
We do it every third Tuesday of the month. The next one's on the 16th. So it's generally fun. I mostly pull problems off of Code Wars. Sometimes I do others like HackerRank or LeetCode, but mostly Code Wars. It's good practice and it's fun.
Yeah, if you want to drop a link to your page in the chat, we'll put it into the document here and we'll share it. And thanks for joining us from Seattle.
No problem.
Let's do one more.
I got a good one. I might be the only one in this room, but I love doing CSS. Like I enjoy styling and stuff. And I just recently came across like CSS battle.dev.
Okay.
It's like it is a website where you go on there, you can just like do different CSS challenges, mostly kind of artsy. But yeah, it's really good. It's really fun. So if you need something to just help practice CSS or flex, that's a good one. Sure.
Nice. And so
Yeah, I love CSS too, so I'm with you.
Hell yeah. There we go, Matt.
do you find that it's that it uses more of like newer CSS features and patterns, or does it also have you dig into like a lot of the fundamental things, you know, about like relative and absolute and the parenting, you know, and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's a good mixture of all those for sure.
Cool.
You definitely will. Like with some of the things, it's not a lot of like just flexing things, right? It's mostly like, here's a picture of something built in CSS. Can you recreate it? So you might have to use some positioning for that. You might have to use some flex, some grid.
Sure.
So I think it incorporates all those skills, which is dope.
Fair enough. Cool. Thanks for sharing.
Heck yeah.
Cool. Thanks, guys. That was a very productive JS land for our first one back. Sweet. Matt, you want to take us to the next thing?
You mean the thing I've already done?
Yeah, good call. I was, you know what? It's like I'm having a hard time with like managing the screens, and so I had the Google Doc open on my own screen. I'm like, man, we're still stuck on this Google Doc. Apparently, we weren't.
Awesome. Well, so this is actually a combination of Mike, Guillermo, and myself. And we're going to talk about what is new in JavaScript 2020 or ES 2020 specification. Some of the things that are new coming out are the dynamic import. And some of these you actually may already know about, but you use Babel to transpile it. So you probably have already used some of these, but guess what? Now it's official and no longer in a stage 0 to stage 4. So we have dynamic import, optional chaining, which has been around for a bit now, but is totally official now. Nullish Coalescing, string prototype, match all, promise all settled, which that is one of the things that still eludes me, so I'm waiting for Guillermo to blow my mind. Big init and global this, which I think I took the first two. So why don't we start with dynamic imports? So this allows you to import JavaScript files dynamically as modules into your application natively. Right now, for you to be able to do this, you need to be able to use Webpack and Babel to actually dynamically import. And to kind of give you an idea what this is like, if you have a condition and you're like, there's only this one time where I need to say bring in this decent sized module or whatever, and you don't want that kind of like included into your entire JavaScript bundle, because you have this constant, this import, it's going to do this import and it's going to download it, it's going to interpret it, and then it'll be able to invoke it once it's actually loaded. Whoa, went way far. So yeah, this is actually really cool because then you don't have to just like have all your JavaScript bundled together, and you don't always have to do the Webpack or Babel thing. Hopefully now they will just support this way and you don't have to do the weird Webpack syntax for it. Optional chaining. Syntax allows you to access deep nested objects properties without worrying about the property existing or not. So just to give you a very brief example, we have this object. It's got A, which is a key for an object that has B, which has an object that is C. So in optional chaining, if you wanted to make sure that the object existed, that A existed, and that B existed before even trying to get to C, you would just be able to put a question mark after each one of those while you're trying to access down further into the object. Versus using the double bang method, what you see below is like the equivalent as being able to just say object question mark, A question mark, B question mark. As you can see, it's a lot easier to read. And it's just way more convenient to do it this way. And it's pretty awesome. I'd highly recommend optional chaining. Global this, which one of you two took this one on?
Yeah, that was me. I think I remember first seeing global this like sometime last year or maybe in 2019. And when I looked at the spec for it, I was like, this is the dumbest name that they could possibly choose for something. Because one, people already don't understand what this means. So just to put global in front of it, I think is making it worse. But I didn't contribute to the spec, not even my distaste for the name. But the basic idea here is that it allows you to write your code in like one way across different JavaScript environments. So it minimizes your checks of like what environment you're in. So specifically, like if you're in Node, there's a global object. If you're in the browser, the window is your, sort of like top level object. And then if you're in a web worker, the self is that top level object. So basically you could just use global this in all three of those contexts and they will all mean the same thing. But again, remember best practices and don't pollute your top level object, your global this, your window, whatever it might be with like too many things. Next one. Yeah, big int. I don't know how often numbers actually go this high, but the number object in JavaScript is 64-bit floating. So a maximum representable value of 2 to the 53rd power minus 1. So that's like the max safe integer constant that JavaScript has. Apparently, if you need to go bigger than that, there was no way of doing that. Like once you got to the max safe integer and kept incrementing, it would stay at that same value. But now we have this thing called a big int, and it is literally just an integer with an n at the end of it.
Elon Musk asked for this to be added to the spec for his bank account.
Zing, you got him. Take that, Elon Musk. So one kind of gotcha here is that the number type and then the big int type are different. So you can't mix them. You can't use them together in calculations. You can only do numbers and numbers and then big int and big int, which would just be a number with an n at the end of it. That's about it. That's all I've got.
All right, cool. So next we've got Nullish Coalescing. So the definition, it's a logical operator that returns the right-hand side when the left of it is null or undefined, and otherwise it'll return the left. So that's basically just a confusing way to say, think about how you use the OR operator, where you have something on the left of the OR and the right on the OR. And but this is specifically to evaluate for null and undefined. And so let me clarify. If I go to the next slide, I'll show you an example. Okay, so if we see like this first example where we return null, nullish default string, right? So here we'll see that it returns default string. It properly caught that null was there, and so it returned the right-hand side. But if we look at, and that would have worked the same if you'd done nullish or if you had done OR, right, the OR operator. But if we look at the next example, where we're returning 0 and then the nullish operator 42. Previously, if you had been using the OR operator, since 0 is falsy, it would have returned 42, right? But since the nullish is only evaluating the left-hand side to see if it's null or undefined, it'll return 0 because it's a valid thing that is not null or undefined. Similarly, if we were to compare false nullish 42, it would correctly return false. Once again, because the only thing that'll return that, the second argument, is if the first one is null or undefined. So I feel like I didn't necessarily explain that great, but give it a try. If you find yourself, I think like a really good example, like I said in the previous slide, the good example to use this is if you're doing like an if operator and like in your, rather an if check, and you want to check between two different things. And you're like, well, the first one, I want to see not just if it's falsy, but I want to know if either it was undefined or if we explicitly put null, then I want to ignore it, right? And then otherwise, we'll use the right-hand side because, well, what if it was a blank string, or what if it was 0, or what if it was false? In all of those cases, if those were valid values that you might be passing through, then you would unintentionally not take that value, and you would miss it in your if, right? So anyway, so again, so if we go to the next slide, so once again, it looks just like the OR operator, but you put the 2 question marks, and instead of evaluating falsy on the first argument, it'll look specifically for null or undefined. Did you have a question, Justin? You're muted. Oh, you're still muted.
I use both Nullish Coalescing and a good example of it is we used it for when we were bringing in Redux. If it was doing like a call or something and it was initially null, we use use it to set like a default value in case something was null at first.
Oh, that's a good point.
Our TypeScript is what we use it for a lot, because those have been available in TypeScript for a while.
Cool. Yeah, good idea. Thanks for sharing. So the next one we'll look at is string.prototype.matchAll. So this one, the definition being, and for all of these, there's a link to MDN for where the definition and examples come from. It returns an iterator of all results matching a string against a regular expression, including the capture groups. So this including the capture groups is the big difference between match and match all. So if we go to the next slide, we see here, like if we were to have this regular expression and this string, and we were to run a match against it using just a regular match, if we look at the regular expression itself, we see how we have the /t, the E is in the parentheses, which is what the capture is for regular expressions. And then we see a larger capture for ST, and then another capture, \D question mark, and then the global flag at the end. If we were to run just a regular match and we were to put it into an array and then log that array, we would see that we would get back test1 and test2 is our array of matching results. Because if you again look at the regular expression, all of the things that are in parens would have been ignored, and just the larger match is what would have been returned. So if we go to the next slide. If we use match all, and again, same regular expression, same string. Oops, sorry, that should say match all. Yeah. So Matt, can you modify that to say match all for me? Right there. Oops.
I can't be in presentation mode.
Yeah, this one. That should be match all. Great. We'll edit this out in post-production, so I'll just look like I was just super smooth the whole time.
I will not edit it out.
So anyways, so in this case, if we were to use the actual match all, we get the results of the regular expression matching, we put it into the array, and we log the array. We'll see that if you look at this matrix of the 2 array results, you see that the first result in each one, test1 and test2, are the same as what we had before. But now additionally, we have all the matching results for all of the captured elements that were in the parens. So we see that like the E had matched on both of them. And then if you look again, the other capture for the ST looking for a number, we get ST1 in the first one, ST2 in the second one. And then the last capture looking for a digit, we get the 1 and the 2. So yeah, personally, there's not something that I don't use regular expressions, and I don't use match or captured things. So if you're a fan of regular expressions and you're a wizard with them, this might be something that you're excited about. Again, definition and some examples are in the link below. And then the next one, I think, is our last one. So this one is promise.allSettled. So again, definition: returns a promise that returns after all the given promises have either fulfilled or rejected, with an array of objects that describes the outcome of each promise. So the important distinction here is that it's like promise.all, but if you've used promise.all before, so again, if you haven't used promise.all is an asynchronous return mechanism where you can pass it multiple promises, and it will only resolve and move to the next step in the promise chain once all of them have resolved. But the thing about promise.all is that if any of them rejects or comes back with an error, then the whole promise.all rejects, and it would drop you into the catch block, and none of your ones that succeeded would pass through. So the nice thing about all settled, if we go to the next slide, is if we look here, all settled will return all of them regardless of how they resolved, and then it will tell you the status of how each one came through. So if we see here, we have promise 1, it'll just be an immediate resolve with the value 3. Promise 2, we're gonna have a timeout, and then we're gonna reject with a value of foo. And then we're gonna have our promises equal to promise 1 and promise 2 in an array. And then we're gonna say, okay, let's return all of them settled. Then if you look at the results of that, first of all, again, it wouldn't immediately reject when promise 2 threw its error. But secondly, if you were then to move through each of them and console log the results status, it would tell you that the first one was fulfilled and the second one was rejected. And so you can still, so the syntax is a little bit different, is that it's now going to be like an object with properties. I think it's status and value, if I'm not mistaken. So status will always tell you fulfilled or rejected, and then you have to actually grab the value off of the result. Whereas on traditional promises, the result just was the value. But again, this is a nice way where if you're doing several things, you don't care about the order that they come back, but you want them all to be done before you move on. And you know that that an error is an acceptable outcome, and you don't want it to just quit everything if one of them errors, then that's where all settled is good. It's similar to, if you think about it, kind of like the optional chaining that Matt had shown. Like optional chaining is really dangerous if you're expecting everything to go well, right? But if you know that like something being missing from your chain is an acceptable result, then optional chaining is good, because that way you're like, hey, if it's not here, let's move on. And if it is, drill all the way down. So there's a way to think about that, right? Like you're going to do multiple promises. One of them might break. That's fine. Let's check when they all come back how they all did. Did I do a decent job explaining that, Matt? Does all settled make more sense now?
It does. Actually, it makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, we use promises all the time. You get it? All the time at Bolton Hill Wrong. And so anyway, so I was happy to take this one on. Did we have any others, or is that the end of our list? I think. I
got a question real quick.
Sure.
Does it inherently come back in the order the promises were set? So like if I do get a reject, yes, do I have an easy way to know which one was rejected? Like I can just assume it's in order?
You should double check, but they should. I think like in the past, like when promised, so I know it does for promise.all. And the reason that I know that is because you can do like in your results, you can destructure them and name them like destructured versions of, you could call them promise 1 result, promise 2 result, promise 3 result, and you would know that they came in that order. I feel like I remember at one point I heard that like there was no guarantee that they will return the same order, but I'm pretty sure they do now. Like double check just to be sure, but I'm pretty sure, because we destructure promise.all results all the time, and we do it like in that way. So
perfect.
I don't know why all settled would act any differently.
Cool.
There was one other update in the ES 2020 spec. It's not really anything important. It's not a new feature, but they formalized or standardized the for in loop. So like if you're iterating over an object, it will always be in the same order, no matter what browser you're in.
Oh,
apparently browsers a while ago had set it up. They had agreement amongst themselves to do it a certain way. But now the spec is, this way, it has to be this way. Kind of neat, but doesn't change anything. Don't use for in, I guess.
Well, but I mean, it's a good point, like, because like there was always that thing, right, where it was like you can do object iteration, but order is never guaranteed, right? So it's nice that now you can at least somewhat rely on that. I still wouldn't, because you never know what browser it is that someone's running, but it's cool to know that it's moving that direction. I think that's our last one, right, Matt?
Yep, it is. Does anyone have any questions?
Cool. That means either we did a great job or we did a terrible job and no one understood anything.
It must be terrible.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks, guys. Nice.
Awesome.
You did a great job. I'm gonna close my chat and not take any other polls. We did great.
All right, so I can stop sharing there. Stop. All right, Damien, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
There you are. God, I couldn't find you in the grid. I panicked.
Let me take over the screen here. Share my main desktop. Here we go.
Ah, sweet. I didn't screw it up this month.
All right, and then I'm gonna just grid you guys over here just in case people have questions. That'll work out. Actually, it's probably better just to bring this in here. Cool. Hello everybody. I am Damon Chivers. I'm a developer out here in the Denver area. Also an instructor at Flatiron School. So I teach at a boot camp. And today we're going to talk a little bit about using hooks with React-Redux. Now, we only have around 20-30 minutes, so I did make sure that, that I'm not going to go over because I have a tendency of doing so. But I also like put in some time for questions and stuff as well. So as we hit a couple points, I'm going to make sure that you guys get a chance to ask some questions too. So just to get going, I did label this like as intermediate style talk. The only reason being is because if you haven't used like React or Redux yet, some of the things that I'm speaking of might not make any sense yet, but I did pop in a piece here, just of some quick hits for those of you who may not have used any of this yet. Like what is Redux, right? What are hooks and what is React-Redux? So just in short, I tend to not use too much words on my slides so that I don't read from them. I can talk a little bit more about what I know. Redux is essentially a state management tool. So in most of the front-end frameworks we use, well, pretty much all of them, we have ways to manage the state, right? Something like React has its own place in each component where you can manage the state of that component. But if you wanted to like abstract that a little bit, you could use something like Redux. And what you essentially get is a global store. And in that global store, you get to kind of manage the way your state is being changed. It's a similar process in most state management tools, whether it's like MobX or Vuex or whatever you may be using. Redux has like reducers, which is like your mutators in a sense, actions, and it has a couple functions attached to the store for like subscribing and just listening out for changes. We'll talk a little bit about that too once we jump into the code, but that's just a quick little run through of what Redux is, right? Just a state management tool, gives you a global state, state container, helps you in big apps, right? Not something you typically would use in small apps, but I do got a small app today that we'll kind of check out and see how we can use some of these flows. Now, next up, we got what are hooks, right? And hooks are just functions, right? The cool thing about these functions that we get is that they allow you to hook into a component's lifecycle, right? Hence the name hooks. But what that means is like you could have, with functional components in React, you can have state, you can simulate some side effects, all these things that you couldn't normally, I mean, you normally could do them with class components, but the functional way of approaching this problem was a little different. And plus, people just wanted to get away from classes, right? Like if you code JavaScript all the time, you tend to not want to use classes since JavaScript classes are kind of fake. They're not like, oh, P-style classes, right? It's just a syntax. And essentially a class is just a function in JavaScript. So React introduced hooks. I think they're about like close to 2 years old now. I think it was like February of 2019. So we might be coming up on like the 2-year anniversary pretty soon. So relatively new, but that could be old in the eyes of tech folks. And yeah, that's pretty much hooks. And then we got React-Redux. React-Redux it's a binding library essentially. So Redux, since it is its own standalone library, it doesn't naturally come with ways to like bind into React really good. So React-Redux allows you to just kind of like subscribe to the store and pull out methods for state and things of that nature a lot faster, right? That's essentially what's kind of going on there. Any questions about any of that stuff? This is also just fluff time for me, all right?
How big of an app, or how would you consider an app to or how would you know that you would need to use Redux?
For sure. So there's really, all right, number-wise, I can tell you if like your app is using more than, let's say, 100, 200 components, right? Even that might be kind of big for something, or that might be extended for something that could use Redux. But essentially, if your state starts to become like too hard to manage, like if you're passing props from one component down like 40, 50 levels or something, and maybe even 30 levels, it's all kind of dependent up to you, but that might be a case where you might want to introduce something like Redux, because it kind of helps you abstract a little bit more. So you don't have to go through that process of passing something so many times. Like if it's 2 components out of those 40 that need the state, well, you don't want to have to pass it 40 levels just to get it to those 2 components, right? In some cases you do. I'm not saying Redux is like a cure to like not use props, because you should still pass props. But in that case, that might be one where you might want to use Redux.
Thank you.
Heck yeah. Other questions about that? Cool. Well, let's push on, right? The topic today is using hooks with React Redux. So I want to kind of talk just a little bit conceptually about why I'm telling you or speaking about hooks and React Redux, and what's the purpose, right? Like, why should we even use these? So in a sense here, I got like out with the old, right? If you've been using React Redux or just using Redux and React for a while, you kind of know about this pattern. You got these functions connect, map state to props, and map dispatch to props. And essentially this connect function it's a higher order component that allows you to connect your component to the store, all right, the Redux store. Like I said, this Redux store is like essentially it's just an object, right? And that object has a couple methods on it. You can get the state from that object. You can subscribe to it. You can dispatch actions to it, many different things in that sense. So this connect function allows you to connect to that store. Connects to the provider in React, but we'll see that in a second too. But by connecting, what happens is you now get access to state. You also get access to the dispatch function. And that dispatch function is going to allow you to send actions to the store in which your reducers accept those actions and your reducers change your state, right? But with this pattern, what tends to happen if you're using a big app, you kind of have to write these functions over and over and over again, right? So you get like the connect function. You always have to connect your app if you plan on connecting to your Redux store. You also always have to pass a map state to props and a map dispatch to props function to connect if you want to have a little more control on how you use those things. Map dispatch to props is kind of optional. If you don't pass anything there, if you just pass like a no value, what happens is you'll get access to dispatch as a prop by itself. But if you do pass a function, that function map dispatch to props will take in dispatch, and then it will allow you to create your own prop functions that you can use throughout that component. But if you want to use that in a different component, well, then you got to write the function again, and so on and so forth, for however many components might need that prop or need that state. Same thing with map state to props. The only difference between that one and the map dispatch to props is that it takes in state. So that function will receive the state from that connect function. And I kind of got my screen in the way here, but through currying, that's how we actually connect to the app. So I don't know if you see like connect as a function and it returns a function, and we're just invoking that next piece, right? Whenever we do that, that's when we get like the state and stuff passed. I think I see a hand in the chat. Corey, got a question?
That might be an old hand that's been here for a while.
Oh, my bad.
I didn't know you had to lower your hand back. I thought it just faded away. So,
well, did you have something I could answer for you?
No, it was on the last one when I asked about the promises.
Gotcha.
So appreciate you for noticing though.
Yeah, for sure. I try to check it. If you like throw something in chat and I don't see it, feel free to just like shout out during the presentation. That's fine.
You're a more considerate presenter than we are. Well done.
Hey, I try, man. I do this every day, you know? So, but yes, these two functions always have to be passed to connect. Connect also takes some other functions, which I chose not to speak about today because we don't really have any hooks that directly correlate to those. So I left them out, but there is some extra stuff that kind of goes in there. So one thing I do want to mention is that the reason why I'm highlighting these functions is because the use of hooks is really just to like clean up code, right? That's what we use them in React for. We try to clean up code. We try to make it more readable, so on and so forth. And typically what I ran into every time I teach Redux, and this could just be me, right? I could be the one messing up, but by trying to explain map state to props or map state to dispatch, the name of those functions, even though it would seem intuitive, it's not, right? And so it tends to take a little time to understand what's actually going on there. But just know map state to props, it's kind of like using delineation in a sense where you're just like, all right, here I'm going to create a prop that resembles this state, but it's not exactly the state, right? Like you can't mutate the state from that prop. You can't even mutate props in React, which is a good thing. There's only one way to change state in your Redux store. That's through the dispatch function. So it's really nice, right? But yes, that's why I'm kind of highlighting this. This is the old way. Let's talk about new way. So in React Redux, they have introduced these hooks that allow us to have access to dispatch and to selector, the state. And so use dispatch, I put the definitions here because they're so simple, right? It gives access to dispatch. So literally it's just giving you access to a function, right? And that function dispatch is the one that we use to send actions to the store. And those actions in return change our state, right? And then the useSelector hook is going to allow us to select state from the store because it always takes in state as an argument to your callback function. And so what you end up getting to do here is like, you can use multiple selector hooks in the same way you kind of like use the useState hook in React. And you can just have multiple selector hooks that grab different pieces of state and allow you to have access to that state in the component. You also could choose to return an object from the useSelector hook that has multiple different pieces of state inside of it. So instead of using it multiple times, you could return an object. The downside of returning an object back from the useSelector hook though, is that the object won't equal itself in the new re-render in React. And therefore you might have like multiple renders that's occurring that you don't want to happen, all right? There's a way around that though. Got this thing called the shallow equal function. So React Redux does provide you a shallow equal function that you can pass as an optional argument to useSelector. So you pass it as your second argument. And essentially it just does a shallow equal between what your old state object used to look like and your new state object, which is comparing the keys and the values, right? So by comparing those properties of the object, it checks and see if something changed. And if it did, it'll just re-render that. So instead of like re-rendering the entire object or the entire component. Oops, I didn't mean to leave that yet. Any questions about any of that stuff? Sounds like virtual DOM. Yeah, in a sense. It does deal with the virtual DOM, right? Like your re-renders will cause you to change the DOM in some kind of way through that process of the virtual DOM being the middleman. So if you don't want to, if you're thinking performance, right? Which if you're just starting out, something we don't tend to care about too much, but if you've been doing this a while, it is something you pay attention to. And so performance wise, you might want to make sure that if you are returning an object back from that useSelector, that you use a shallow equal just to make sure it's not constantly re-rendering itself. So my next segment is jumping into some live coding. So just before we do that, conceptually, any questions?
Maybe this will be covered in the live coding, but if you have like multiple stores, so meaning multiple states, how do you handle that if you've got like multiple stores feeding into one component, let's say?
Gotcha. So
probably a bad idea.
Yeah. I was about to say that. Multiple stores is usually a bad idea, right? Like, because you can have multiple states within your store, right? You only really need one Redux store. Now, there is cases where people tend to use multiple stores, and there is a hook for that. It is called useStore. And so you can access certain stores, but I think useStore actually only gives you access to the one you gave to provider. So you might actually have to use a different function. I forgot what the hook is called, but there is a hook to allow you to, it actually might be useStore. Yeah, I might be tripping myself up. But yeah, it allows you to like, basically like fetch different contexts, right? And so you could get different stores. It's usually a bad idea. You don't want to keep switching your store throughout your application because that could cause even more problems. But if you did need to do that, there is a hook for it. I kind of left it out of this one because I think people who are tending to do that are more experienced with this React Redux stuff. But great question.
Just to that multiple store thing, I will also agree it's a terrible idea. Worked at a place that had 10 individual stores for the application. Please don't ever do that. Just don't.
I couldn't see why anybody would, but I mean, there's
Somebody did.
Yeah, because the thing is with a Redux store, you can have so many different states and have like a reducer per state. That way, like, you know which function is controlling each piece of state. So you shouldn't need 10 stores, but if you do.
To their defense, their argument to me was, this is my first time using Redux. I didn't know any better. I said, it's okay.
That makes sense. That's the only excuse I could see making some sense there, man. Hey, thanks for sharing that. I actually, like, that was a point I was gonna put into these slides, and then I decided not to because I was like, nobody's actually using multiple stores, but I guess not. Any other questions before we jump into the live code?
So is it always a good idea to introduce Redux before you start building the application, or would you add Redux after your application starts getting a little bigger or harder to manage the state?
Oh, this is an awesome question. All right. The reason why is because I'm always helping to teach, like, doing these things and building your apps in vertical slices, right? Making sure that you, like, do it per feature. Now, if I'm telling you that, I would say you don't need to start by building with Redux, all right? You can always add in Redux at any point and you'll be just fine. But what you don't want to do, probably, you don't want to wait till your app is like 2,000, 3,000 components deep before you add it, right? That's a lot more time. You got to worry about, like, how long does it take for you to get everything converted over? But the good thing is you can do it in, like, pieces. So each component, you can kind of do it at a slow pace and make everything work just fine. But I would say if you're doing a small project and you just want to practice, go ahead and introduce it in the beginning, all right? Or if you want to see, like, what the changes, like the ramp up time for starting out normal and then adding in later, that's also a good way, right? I wouldn't say there's no right or wrong there. But if you're doing a huge project, you know it's going to keep getting bigger, might benefit you and your team if you start early, right? Unless you want to just get paid longer. If you want to get paid longer, do it later, right? The more work you got, the longer you got a job.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Just a quick question. If you're thinking about making an app and you're debating between Redux or standard state, is there a trade-off efficiency-wise for your app?
Not necessarily, right? Let's say, so I would have to think huge app in this case, right? Thinking about when you want to use it and when not to. If you have a really big app, I think if we're talking about, like, efficiency as you as a developer, you and your team will be more efficient because you know where the state is located. So you know exactly how you have to change it. There's only one way to do it, right? That's dispatch. And you don't have so many opportunities to accidentally mutate your state as you would if you didn't use Redux, right? So I would say as a team, maybe that would be more efficient, right? Just because, like, the process is different. It's very structured. With just regular React, everybody knows React is, like, essentially just JavaScript, right? So you can write pretty much anything you want to and make it work. Doesn't mean it's efficient. In short, that's my answer to that. I haven't used Redux on anything bigger than, like, maybe 500 or so components. So I don't know how much deeper into that I could get if I were to work on something like that, but that'd be my answer for now.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. All right, I don't want to go over my time. Like I said, I tried to practice this to stay down low. So let's jump into some live coding, all right? I want you guys to kind of see what this looks like and what some of the trade-offs are with these hooks. So right here. Now, for half of my students that's in the crowd, they know that I like to use the Rick and Morty API anytime I'm demoing something. Just my favorite thing to do. So I did do that for this application. Essentially, here's the goal. I kind of just recreated their API page. So we got, like, some characters showing up on the page here, little Rick in the corner, and some styling, right? What's going on is, let's look at the Redux here. We got our store that I was talking about. I'm just creating this store based off of one reducer. That reducer happens to be the one I'm using for my characters. So as I was kind of talking about the pattern of Redux, this is what a reducer looks like. It's essentially a pure function that always takes in the same amount of inputs and should return you the same thing each time, right? And so we're using a switch statement to change based on the action type. And then when I set my characters, I'm just putting some characters into state. That's what's happening right now. And let's go back here. To access those, what I'm doing is I'm using that old way. Map state to props, map dispatch to props. So I call my map state to props function, right? Or when I'm writing it, I've destructured out the characters from state because it always receives state as an argument. And I'm just making props based off of that state. Then what I get is with my map dispatch to props, I am taking in dispatch as the argument. And I'm kind of building my own function that's going to be in props for taking in these characters and then dispatching this action to the store. So that action is just an object with a type and the characters. And if I go back and show you my reducer real fast, it just takes in that action. And when it receives set characters, it's going to take those characters, set it in my state. I went super, super basic for this. Nothing real crazy. And then at the bottom, we see that connect function I was mentioning earlier. So we got the connect function invoked with map state to props and map dispatch to props. That's going to return us a function out. And that new function is going to be invoked with the app component, right? The top level. So that's kind of what the structure is looking like right now. Once this component has mounted to the page with React, I'm sending a request to that Rick and Morty API, page 7 exactly, and getting that data back and setting them into state. And I'm essentially using that prop that I created right here at the bottom. Now, this is one of the things I do like about Redux is like your props that tend to be in your components, most of the time you can find right at the bottom of the screen, right? If you're using this old style. You don't have to go up like 20 levels to figure out where it came from. That's not a bad thing either, but I tend to like this one. The cool thing though is this is a lot of stuff and we don't need it all anymore. We got a couple functions down here. We got this connect going on. And if you don't want to have to worry about like figuring out what that does like behind the scenes and all that, we can use these hooks, all right? So the two we talked about, it's going to be use dispatch. And then we're also going to use selector. And I'm going to use those two in place of the connect function. So I'm actually going to get rid of this connect. Now I'm going to break my code for a second, right? Because this app is expecting to connect and all that good stuff. So I got to go change some things up. I got to get rid of this connect function, which in turn means I need to get rid of map state to props and map dispatch to props. Now I won't do it all at one time, but I am going to go ahead and get rid of the connect function. So now I'm just exporting my app as I normally would in a React app without Redux. Then what I'm going to do, I'm going to start using the hooks one by one, all right? And I'll compare them for you. So the first thing I'm going to do is, since I still do need to get like these characters in the state to kind of make my stuff work, I'm going to make sure that I'm still using that dispatch function and that I have a set characters function. And so what I end up doing here is I'm going to bring in a hook called useEffect from React. And here I'm going to change my component did mount to useEffect. And that useEffect takes in a function as its argument. So I'm just going to do like that, just to make it nice, quick, and easy. And then its second argument is an array. And that array doesn't have any dependencies at this moment. And we could talk about that another time. But now I have my useEffect currently, like it's a side effect for this component, but I can only use hooks inside of functional components. So another thing I get to do is get rid of this like class thing. So we'll do function app, taking props, just like so. And then that also means I don't need this render. So I'm already like kind of refactoring in a sense. I'm cleaning up this code just by implementing those hooks. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and change out this map state to props. So I'm going to use something called use selector. Oops. Let's do this. Characters equals use selector. My snippets are getting to me. And this function just takes in, this function takes in a function, right? And the function that we pass it is going to take in a state. So I'm going to say that the state is coming in. And the only thing I want this selected to return is essentially I want to select my character state. So I'm just going to do state dot characters. Of course, you could do some destructuring too to clean that up. But that hook is allowing me to just select out the character state from the Redux store. I feel like that reads way better than map state to props because it's like, hey, I want to use the selector and here's the state I want to pull out. Might be a lot easier to teach it this way. Hopefully one day we can start with hooks, but for now, we always got to start with classes. The next thing I'm going to do is to get this function of props.setCharacters working. I'm actually going to turn it into a function that just belongs to this component. So we're going to say set characters. If you remember anything of what this function looks like, it took in characters. And then what it did was it essentially just called a dispatch here and dispatched these characters into the store. To do that, I need to use my other hook, use dispatch. With this one, all you got to do is write a constant of dispatch and just say use dispatch. Don't gotta have that like huge map state to dispatch function and write your functions in there. Like it's just more clean, right? I know exactly what this does. The cool thing about the use dispatch hook too is that the reference will always be the same. So you don't have to worry about like a random re-render happening if you want to think performance. It's always going to be the same dispatch. And then what I want to do, so I got my function here. I can now do dispatch. I'm going to essentially go ahead and dispatch my action to the store with type that should be set characters. And then also has my characters in there. And I probably should structure this good because I can't be showing people janky JavaScript, right? Even though my quotes are a little off right now, but let's not pay attention to it. So with that, what I've now done is change everything to a functional component. I got some hooks in here that's allowing me to access my state as well as access dispatch to the Redux store. And what I could do now is I no longer have to use this for anything. So that is like one of the worst things JavaScript gave us, right? So let's see if everything works right. Oh, can I get it on the first try? Hey, there we go. Oh, no, we were there. We were so close. So it looks like I actually did something here. Yeah, I forgot to take off the props thing. All right, round two. We got it? Yeah, there we go. So we just refactored our class component using the old way of using that connect function to use some React hooks, man. That's what it looks like. We can get rid of these little ugly things down here. So much less code, so much cleaner. But that is all I got for you today, all right? I don't want to go over my time. If you got any questions for me, feel free to reach out at any point, all right? Here is my contact info. On Denver Devs, I guess I'm the only Damon because I was able to just take @Damon. And then in LinkedIn, I'm Damon Chivers. And if you want to email me, I don't check it. You could do shiversdamon@gmail.com, all right? But thank you guys, I appreciate you. There we go.
Great job. I think Matt would probably have time for a few questions, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Do you have any resources for people just getting into Redux?
Yeah, for sure. I think Udemy definitely has some good courses. I could be biased here and tell you should watch my videos on YouTube, but I think they're only for Flatiron, so I don't have access to them directly. But I'll shoot you a little link in here in a second that can give you access to some Redux videos.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I do have just a one-off question. So when you did, I think it was use dispatch as a const, is that for the sake of only having one instance of it?
No, so it actually does a
like
so
if you didn't, because you're already importing the function.
yeah.
Go ahead.
It's for the re-render process, right? So like since React is always re-rendering whenever you change state or change your props or whatever, that constant of dispatch with use dispatch, the hook itself does a comparison behind the scenes. So if the context hasn't changed, it will not change, right? So whether you had a let or a const, it wouldn't matter. It's always going to be the same reference to the one in the store. The only time it would be different if we were talking about what Mike was asking earlier, like if I had 10 stores and I was changing the context of my store, then dispatch would change.
Gotcha. Sweet, right on.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, just one more. So I can understand how this takes the place of like set state or a state in your class. But would this also take the place of like React hooks use state?
Yeah, so use state is actually a replacement for like state in your class. And so
Right.
Redux is a replacement for both of those. If you are just trying to like push your abstract your store, right? Doesn't mean that you can't use state, right? Like you still should. Like there's cases where you don't need to put everything in your Redux store. Like let's say I just got a toggler, right? Like a light switch. Just, hey, when I turn this on, this is what my app looks like. When I turn this off, this is what my app looks like. That's something I don't necessarily need to put in the Redux store. I might just have that in the component it needs to change, right?
Sweet.
So you got options.
So Redux store you'd use for like the global state that you'd use in multiple spots as opposed to just like one place.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a good pattern for it. You don't want to like just put everything in your Redux store because if it's not being used in multiple places of your app, it's kind of pointless, right? So yeah, you can use both in tandem. Great question.
Was that shallow equal? Oh, sorry.
Oh, you're good.
Was that shallow equal comparator used in that code example? I just didn't catch it if it was, because I didn't really fully understand that part. And if I could see code, that'd be awesome. But
yeah, I didn't use it because it is a little bit more advanced this time around. But Connect does it automatically. It always has a shallow equal to just like compare the properties in your object that's being returned.
Okay.
So you can use it with use selector if you need to, all right? The only time you really need to is if you're returning an object from use selector. But if you're just trying to pull out one piece of state, you can use multiples of that hook.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, great question.
Hey, Angie, another thing you may want to look into is I think Jordan Pearson posted this, but there is a really good article, I'll repost it, about the difference between like React context and using use state versus using Redux and just like the proper times that you want to use it.
Nice. Heck yeah.
Thank you, Jordan, for supplying that.
Thank you.
All right. I think I'm gonna swing it back to you guys then. Thanks for all the questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Damien. Awesome presentation.
Thank you.
I see Kyle is Kyle. We'll call you Kyle from now on, Kyle.
Fuck you.
But love you. Thank you everyone for coming. Very successful first meetup for the year. I think we had like up to 47 people on here at one point. So thank you everyone for joining. Join us next month. We are the last Tuesday of every month. If you are interested in giving a talk, we're looking for February speakers or any month after February too. So please reach out to us on Denver Devs, either myself, Guillermo, or Mike Frazier, or bit.ly/ds-talk if you want to just submit. So yeah, thank you everyone.
Good to see everybody again. Bye.
Thanks,
Later.
everybody.
Thanks, and I'll reach out soon.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Justin.
man.